Hello and welcome back to Analysing Avatar. You thought we were gone, but we're back from the dead, baby. Don't know what that was. I was just momentarily possessed by a different human being. That wasn't me.
Back from the dead and trying desperately to remember what happened in Avatar Series 4.
Yeah. So for those of you thinking... oh, God.
I basically... Sorry to entertain you. I almost, woke up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat going, I think there was a clip show. I was like, yeah, there was definitely a clip show.
Having looked through the questions, thankfully, it's a lot of comments, it's a lot of thoughts. Most of them explain what they're referring to. There's very little, I think we'll be okay to talk about, to go to the theatre without too much of a... Thankfully, none of these questions are, so drilled in specific that we've got to remember, a particular scene or anything like that. So I'm relieved at that, because it has been, Chris and I are aging, for listeners, and we're getting to that age now where we're like, I watched it 3 months ago. What happened again?
Yes, it's weird that we can't do that because I'm pretty sure it might have even been a Rewind Reviews. We recently on a podcast had a big discussion about how our memories aren't what they are, so we won't do that again. But yeah, there's absolute. It is a depressing feeling.
Mm.
I don't know if it's memory or just life being busier as well. But it is a depressing feeling going to watch a show like Jess yesterday when there was an advert for Yellow Jackets. I don't know, series 20, whatever they're on of that show now.
Yeah.
It's been so long since we watched series 1. I think it's only 3 or 4 or whatever. But
I think
they were it's what? Sorry,
I think it's 3 or 4. Yeah, I think you're right. I'm going to guess
cool.
4, but I think it could easily be 3.
And she was like, "Oh, we never continued that, did we?" And I was like, "No, but we enjoyed it. We should get back in. We should watch it." And then there was this pause, and I was like, "I have to watch a recap video or rewatch series 1." That's just a depressing sign of age. That if a show's been off longer than 6 months, I have to either watch a recap video or rewatch it.
Yeah, it's bad. I'm at the moment. I'm rewatching all of the original Netflix Daredevil run because I was like, I remember the first series pretty well, but I cannot tell you what happened in the second or third series. I was like, I think the second series was divided 2 plots. There's a Punisher arc at the beginning, and then there's foot arc. Or the hand, sorry.
Electra arc? Or...
I think the Electra arc is season 3, but I don't remember it. And I think there's Bullseye in season 3 as well. And I don't remember that either. And I think Bullseye's coming back. So I'm rewatching because I don't remember.
I'll say it. I don't think I've seen series 3.
You know what? I totally get that because I think we were all a bit burnt out on those Netflix shows, especially after I think The Defenders didn't turn out amazing. It was just bones under New York or whatever. But dinosaur bones under New York that are going to destroy the world or whatever. But I will say, really, really enjoying it, and I do think it suffered from there being too many Netflix Marvel shows, and actually Daredevil remained a sort of pretty much, with the exception of the back end of season 2, which isn't great. Daredevil was pretty much a bastion of quality across all of those, and it maintained it. Even season 3 was pretty good. So, yeah.
So I think the problem was, and I'm sorry to interrupt, and I'm just double checking. Am I right?
This isn't what.
Yeah. So the problem was Netflix cancelled it on the 29th of November 2018, and series 3 only started on October 19th, 2018. So that's why I didn't watch series 3. They cancelled it after a month of it being out, and it was just felt a bit, oh well, they've cancelled it. So
yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, no, I remember enjoying it, and I'm excited. I'm still working my way through, but I'm getting there. It's good. I like it a lot. I'm glad I chose to rewatch it. Anyway, let's do Avatar talk, and we'll start, I think, Chris. For those who don't know, the purpose of this podcast, we promised we'd do this. We threatened we'd do this. Is more the word. Usually, when we do Analysing Avatar, we do feedback from the last series, because we're always recording these about 10 weeks in advance. So we did feedback for series 1 of Korra during season 2 of Korra. Same with Season 2 of Korra's feedback, we then read out across Season 3 and responded to. But of course, with Season 4, there was no Season 5, so we're like, what do we do with the feedback we get? Keep sending it. We'll do a special little bonus episode where we cover some of the feedback we got. So we're going to do that today. But first, I think people will be interested in hearing some of our thoughts on the news that Avatar is returning with a Korra sequel series, with the next bender to inherit the Avatar powers, which is an earthbender, in a new series called Seven Heavens. And I'm sure listeners already know all of this, but I thought it'd be interesting if we had a quick little chat about our thoughts on this. Do you want to hear the log line, Chris? Before we...
Yeah, yes, I do. Yes, for the purpose of the listeners, I've just reread the plot overview, going, oh yeah, what's that about again? But yes, give me the logline.
Yes. So per the official logline, the series is set in a world shattered by a devastating cataclysm. A young earthbender discovers she's the new Avatar after Korra, but in a dangerous era, the title marks her as humanity's destroyer, not its savior. Hunted by both human and spirit enemies, she and her long-lost twin must uncover their mysterious origins and save the Seven Heavens before civilization's last strongholds collapse. So, I want to address one thing immediately out the gate, is all of the lol, Korra destroyed the world people. Shut up. just shut up. Like, it's we don't know what happened yet. We don't know what this cataclysm is yet. I wouldn't be surprised if it was related to choices Korra made, but I would not anticipate it being a direct, like, Korra pushed a big destroy the world button. I think it's going to be some villainous force took advantage of Korra's opening of the spirit world, and that's what caused the cataclysm, but it's turned everyone against the Avatar. Don't anticipate them being like, well, no one liked Korra as a character, so we're going to make her basically like a historical villain now, like and actually make her the villain, like she really did fuck up. I just don't see it. I don't see them. I don't see Mikey and Bri, as we have lovingly named them, doing that. So until you see the show, people, the ones that are on the we hate Korra, ha ha ha, the writers must hate her too, they've made her the source of all of the world's woes. Shut up. Don't want to hear it. I mean, there's people who are doing it jokingly, and that's fine, but the people who are really jumping on the Korra hate train and saying this is some sort of validation for their hatred of Korra, I just need those people to go away for a little bit. Just wait till the show comes out, and then we'll judge. And maybe that is what they're going to do. Maybe you're right, but we don't know that yet. But yeah, what are we thinking, Chris?
I think... Sorry. I think the Avatar being viewed potentially as a bit of a villain, and being on the run is unique, is different. So I'm really excited about that. Yep. I think one element of it, I go, oh, that's a shame. Purely because, so this idea of them being in this severed world and this different world, I know it's we've discussed throughout the Korra seasons of this. And I know it's a little bit controversial, but you and I are both actually a big fan of them modernising the world and sort of seeing Avatar content in a more recognisable modern world. With cars and trains and planes, and with planes, trains, and automobiles. Korra, planes, trains,
the sort of industrial revolution they depicted in Korra. Yes, yeah.
So the idea of a third series, one of the appeals to me would have been seeing that extended further, seeing what the world looks like now, and also obviously, which this show is clearly going to explore a little bit, what the world looks like specifically, how it was left at the end of Korra with the spirit world and the physical world, human world.
Yeah, I guess physical world. Yeah.
Being closer aligned. So the idea of that severing is a shame, but then maybe that's going to make the show really effective. Like, if I'm already at the premise going, then, maybe the show itself is going to really play with those emotions. But it sounds like they're doing some new, different ideas. It has me nervous that they've already announced it's, at least according to the Wikipedia, the Avatar Wikipedia, they've already announced it's 2 seasons, because then if there's like a third, I'm going to be like, oh, are you stretching this out further? Like, I like the idea of Airbender, one story, Korra, standalone stories, this, one shorter story, or maybe 2 shorter stories. Do you know what I mean? One 2-season arc, another 2-season arc, maybe a third 2-season arc, whatever.
Well, to be fair, just to clarify with that, a Variety who reported this basically said that at the moment it's 26 half-hour episodes spread across 2 seasons. But there's no word on whether that is... Like, they haven't specifically said... That's what's been ordered by Nickelodeon. That doesn't necessarily mean that's the end of the show. I mean, it could be. It could literally be they've got a really good 2-season arc in mind. 26 episodes in, out, bish, bash, bosh. And if that's the case, that also excites me, because that's a third thing that we've not done. As you sort of said, it doesn't follow the structure of any previous Avatar series. So I think. But if the plan is just that that's the first 2 series is ordered, and if it does well, we'll do it. We'll do a fourth. We'll do a third and fourth, or whatever. But we'll see. It's unclear, I'd say, at this stage. But at least 26 episodes are happening for sure. So that's pretty exciting.
Wow. Unless they try and make any sort of statements. In which case it might get cancelled, Dan. Let's not rule that out.
Yeah. To be fair to them, though, by the time that the episodes actually are airing, they'll be well on the way to finishing up the last episodes. Because if they've had a 2-season order out the gate, they're going to be producing these pretty much alongside each other. And I don't, strictly speaking, like I feel like that train isn't turning around unless it's pretty severe. Like I think that. Yeah, I think a huge amount of money is about to be spent very quickly, and I think Nickelodeon are going to be on the hook either way for these 26 episodes, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, that's fair.
I'm with you though. I'm pretty excited about it, and I think this idea of like there's been some sort of cataclysm. It's sort of a post-apocalyptic world. It's a dangerous era. Like it says, the last of humanity's strongholds. Here you go. Before civilization's last strongholds collapse. So civilization is being wiped out, basically. We're doing a reset. And while I'm with you that I kind of enjoyed, for something different, Korra doing this sort of like industrial revolution world, I also now like the idea of doing something even different from that and having like a world sort of like maybe being torn apart at the seams because of spirit stuff. And there's just like relics of that, just like they're walking through a desert and like there's just like a train sticking out of the desert because it's just an old abandoned train, like Kuvira's train across the Earth Kingdom or whatever, like that. That's I think there's some cool imagery that can be done with that. We're 100 years on, presumably, 80 years probably on. I think that's. You could have a lot of really cool imagery with old Industrial Revolution Korra world sort of sticking out, like the remains of that just all over the place, in a sort of cool new half spirit, half physical world. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of potential for this to be really good. I know there's leaked concept art people aren't happy with. I'll say this now. I mean, we don't know from what stage of production that concept art exists from. It's like. That could be like first designs. Do you know what I mean? People are a little worried they look a little too like Voltron characters. I get that. I do. They do look a little bit too much like Voltron characters, maybe. Very clean. But again, seeing them in motion will make a difference as well. I don't know. I'm not too worried about the concept art. I know some people really don't like the designs, but I think they're fine. But yeah, no, I'm pretty excited about it, to be honest with you. I think it's going to be cool. I'm in for a very bold take on this world. And that's what this seems to be, reading this description. These are some really bold choices.
What I like about the concept art is because I haven't got much view on the sort of design style and comparisons to other things.
Sure.
I like the costumes shows a commitment to this world. Like, you look at those costumes and you'd think, space, multi-world. Do you know what I mean? They emulate Star Wars. They emulate stuff like that, where there's, people on the run, and these guys look like people on the run, and I think the concept art is fine. It's one frame with two characters in. Like, don't worry, like just chill, just wait.
Yeah. And it looks like, I mean, if the young girl with the prosthetic leg is the Avatar character and the older character is the protector, we're back to a very young Avatar, and I kind of like that too. Because we just had teenage avatars for a while, Avatar for a while, so let's go back to a younger Avatar again and do some stuff with that. So I don't know. People are getting too. I mean, this is just the internet. It's just the internet, and it's probably not really reflective of most people's actual thoughts. I get that. Like I'm understanding that, like, the internet focuses the negativity into like a fine beam and shoots it at you. But like, it does seem like there's a lot of like immediate wish to dislike this series. Like, it feels like a deliberate, like people just really want to dislike it. And those people, I'm sure, are not the majority. I'm sure they're just a minority, a vocal minority. But like, it is disappointing to see, because I'm just like, come on guys, give it a chance. Like, you've not seen it yet. Like, it feels like you really did want to dislike this. But hopefully most corners of the Korra Korra Avatar sphere are excited for this, because I sure am.
Me too. I'm very excited.
So, in terms of how we're going to cover it when it happens, we do not know. We just don't know. Do we wait for the whole series to come out and then just do it weekly, like we did with analyzing Avatar? Like with like week by week, with at least me having foreknowledge. I don't know if Chris will choose to watch it first time when we do that, or if we try and cover it as it airs, for the hits, for the obvious upswing in our listenership that would bring. I don't know. It's really going to depend on what its release schedule is when it comes out. Nothing to worry about just yet, but yeah.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because
go on.
On the one hand, week to week feels like a unique opportunity in us doing something differently. Mm-hmm. Equally, you watching it all, but you watching it and me not, allows us to keep the current format in quite a fun way. And also, obviously, has its benefits in terms of recording schedules and stuff like that. It allows for more flexibility there. We'll work out.
We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But I'm excited about it, and I think, and rest easy. We'll cover it, but we're covering it. It's analyzing Avatar.
Oh yeah,
is what it is. We've done that. We did Avatar. We did Korra. Bring on Seven Heavens. Is it Seven Heavens or Seven Havens?
I think it's Heavens, isn't it? Well, that's how But I'll be honest with you, mate. I read it the first time as Secret Heavens, so I'm not the best person to ask.
It might be Havens, because it says save the Seven Havens before civilization's last strongholds collapsed. I think the Seven Havens are the like Havens protections from whatever the cataclysm is. So it might be like the 7 major cities that we've met across our your Ba Sing Se's, Republic City, Northern Water Tribe, Southern Water Tribe, Fire Nation Capital, Ember Island, maybe. Like they choose a bunch of places we've been and they've all become sort of strongholds, like your Ba Sing Se's and stuff like that. So I don't know. We'll see. We shall see. Anyway, shall we get, Chris, to questions that we were asked by the lovely people?
Let's do it, man.
There's a bunch. We'll fly through these. There's a bunch, but some of them are like more like quick fun comments than they are like we'll just start quickly with this one. From Moo2900 said, drinking a cup of tea and chatting about Avatar sounds lovely. I agree, Moo2900. That's why we do it.
Yeah, it's been lovely. Yeah,
it's great. It's good. Yeah. We'll jump to I think of the more wide questions from our Discord, and I think it'll be interesting to get your thoughts on these, Chris. And I think these are the ones I might have sent you in advance. But the first one comes from Teflon. Shall I read both of these out because one's sort of related to the other, or do you want to do them one at a time?
No, I think they are related, so they can be read out together. I think,
Great.
but putting them together is just the themes of the questions. They're both great questions.
Yes, So Teflon said on our Discord, hopefully not stepping in Oscar's question, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on comparing the character arcs and emotional resonance of Avatar to Korra. Obviously, it's not quite that simple given the differences in how the stories came together behind the scenes, and because Last Airbender arcs continued into Korra. You definitely talked about it scattered around, but I think it will be interesting to hear about where the characters end up from season 1 in each show. And then Punkfish, also on Discord, said, somewhat related to Teflon's question, I'd also love to hear you reflect on your expectations. Chris didn't know anything when you guys started Avatar The Last Airbender, but you both had some knowledge of the universe when starting Legend of Korra. And I'm sure once you finished the first season, you must have formed some thoughts about what you expected of the rest of the show. What you would have liked it to do. Have those expectations changed over the course of the show? And there are any interesting things to share in this regard? Should we start with the character stuff then? With Teflon's section of the question?
Yeah, so take a shot. But it is the answer to the question in terms of you referenced my answer, so I'm just going first.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Take a shot. I'm sorry. But it is, if the question is what, having known the world, having known Avatar, what was my expectation versus kind of where it ended up, I was expecting, as vocalized on the podcast a lot, which is why I'm saying take a shot, for a disparate team to slowly form together into a team Avatar. And I won't talk about that too long because we talked about it a lot on here. But I think that was my biggest expectation, and that didn't happen. And it's really tricky because I think this could be said for the whole of Korra, really. The surprising elements of the show make it different, but also I think is the reason some people are already critical of the third series, because they had something in their heads for Korra and it wasn't that. And I think the sort of Team Avatar side of it is a good example of that. And I think the reality is the arcs in terms of the characters are cleaner and more defined in Avatar. Most characters go from an A to B really effectively. And in Korra, they go from an A to B to a C via F and G, sometimes looping back round to A. Not all of them, but there's more. It ebbs and flows a bit more. And I think that's a structure thing in terms of it trying to be so standalone. I think it's things not necessarily being planned from the beginning. We talked about it a lot, I love Korra and Asami. You cannot convince me that was planned from the beginning, because they would have done more to embed it, like they did with Aang and Katara. Mm-hmm. So, and I think if you look at the journey that Zuko goes on as well, they kind of almost to some degree... Little Zuki Poos. They were able, by having the Fire Lord be the out and out villain no matter what, and the prick, and then Zuki Poos can go on a real arc and be a bit more nuanced. And they tried to, but I really respect the decision to do things in a different way. With the villains in this show, they tried to make the villains them. Do you know what I mean? There was no Fire Lord. They all had more nuance. Toph's got that speech in series 4 where she talks about what they all wanted and sort of insinuates that their ideologies make them go too far, basically. But some of those ideologies, the show itself sort of shows the the agreement or the understanding to the point of, oh, okay, right, well, yeah, I can see where they're coming from of that, even though, there's people doing horrendous shit. And I think that's a more interesting take, but it's not as clean, especially when it's standalone, especially when budgets are tight, especially when you've only got 13 episodes, and especially when you then have to devote quite a lot of time to explaining the nuances of how the villain feels and what they're doing, and you get a little less time on Marco, and how he's feeling and what he's doing, and we kind of, justice for Asami was a thing throughout this show, and I think, in series 4 there isn't as much time on a character like Marco, and it's not as clean, and my expectation, because it was so clean in Avatar, would be for it to be that clean. And there are exceptions, and that's a I suppose the question requires critical analysis, doesn't it? But it wasn't a deal breaker. I still really enjoyed the show, as we talked about. But I think that would be where I land on that question, I think. What about you?
Yeah, I think it's interesting in terms of the sort of expectations side in general. I think Chris and I are a little, are a little long in the tooth at this game now, and I think we've both learned when it comes to expectations of where we want the story to go. Obviously, ideas will flash to us as people who studied screenwriting, and we'll go, "Oh, it'd be cool if they go this route, or it'd be cool if they go that route," and I'm sure we did a bit of that as the podcast went on. We talked about like, oh, it'd be really cool if this story happens, or if they expand on this idea, or, there's always those little desires. But I think mostly when it comes to expectations for me, I do think a lot about how our expectations for Korra, in terms of its quality, shifted. Because of being burnt, particularly, I think, by season 2. On the rewatch for me and the initial viewing of it for Chris, and its poor execution. And I've got a comment here. I'm going to sneak another one in, not a question, but just a comment from the Ponderer, who we'll talk about a little bit later, because Ponderer is a regular commenter, and I think Ponderer comes back up further into this. But Ponderer said on our episode for The Calling, which is 102 of Analysing Avatar, it's funny to me how knowing where the rest of the season goes, a lot of the uncertainty about how Korra's character is or isn't being challenged just reads as, understandably, not trusting the show to do long-form character work after books 1 and 2. Like, even the idea that Korra's whole arc would be wrapped up so cleanly and definitively this early into the season would sound absolutely ridiculous if Air and Spirits had been on Avatar The Last Airbender's level of earning audience trust in storytelling. So much of this episode sounds like Dan and Chris are just hesitant to offer the season that trust, as they're scared of the possibility that Book 3 having decent storytelling was an anomaly. Now, I think that actually really does illuminate a little bit, especially with Punkfish's question about expectations, because I think what happened, again, I think I really learned this lesson during like late Steven Universe. Like, just there's no point in planting flags and being like, this is what I want to happen, so it must happen, because you'll only disappoint yourself. Other writers will have different priorities, different ideas. So in terms of storyline expectations, there was things I might have wanted to happen, but I was not married to any of them, because, let's see what these writers have got cooked up themselves. In terms of those quality expectations, though, yeah, we were super burnt by seasons 2 particularly, and that massively impacted our trust for the show, and therefore our reviews of the subsequent episodes, and I think that's really interesting.
I think it's a really interesting point, and I think the the big example of that, to zero in on Series 4, is Korra dealing with the trauma of Series 3, and whether it's a physical thing because there's still some of the poison in her, whether it's an emotional thing because she needs to reconnect with the spirit world and Rava, and
we kept going like, oh, is this it? Is it over? And it was like episode 3, and we were like, oh, maybe she's figured that out. Oh god, the writers have done it again.
Yeah, and really, she hadn't figured it out, but it was just, it's kind of, what I mean by, there's no A to C in this show, or A to B in this show. It's A to B, nip back to A, take a little look at G, come back round to C, and I think the core storyline in Series 4 in particular is really, really reflective of that.
Yeah, and to give my take on Teflon's question about the characters, which is linking to this, obviously, because we're talking specifically about Korra and the characters. I think it's trickier with this show because obviously they had this idea early on to do like sort of a villain of the year sort of thing. So the seasons are all mostly isolated from each other in terms of character arcs, with the exception of 3 into 4. You know, she carries the trauma of 3 into 4. So it's really hard for me to judge. They're certainly not comparable in the same way, because Aang went on one arc across 3 seasons. Korra went on a mini arc in season 1, a mini arc in season 2, a mini arc in season 3, and then that carried into a larger arc for series 4. We often talked about as well how the show was not as cleanly written, and characters would seemingly have jumps in their personality between them. I remember us commenting in season 3 how capable Korra suddenly seemed and how she was making smarter decisions, and it's like, oh, this is a result of what she learned from the previous seasons, but the show isn't explicitly telling us that. I'm just putting that together myself from her behavior. She is behaving more maturely, but it's not like it's sort of like the difference between like we're a season on, some time has passed, Korra is more mature, and like, oh, this story has led to Korra behaving more mature in this exact way. That like we're explicitly not only saying that, but we're like demonstrating it. I don't know. It was the character arcs were super messy across Korra because of that structure, and I still really respect their choice to do something as bold as a completely new structure for the show. But I do think the thing that suffered most from that choice, as Chris pointed out when talking about how obviously the show also had to introduce us to a new villain every year and establish their motives instead of our cackling Fire Lord, who was just like quote unquote bad guy, and he didn't need a huge amount of characterization. So we got to spend all of our time with the kids. Not only are we not spending,
which isn't to say he didn't get characterizations. Just to interrupt you there, obviously he did. That character was very defined as well and stuff like that.
Sure, but he was a very straightforward character, and he didn't go on an arc.
Yeah.
So we didn't need to. We didn't, once we introduced him and set him up for what his goals were, we didn't need to spend a huge amount of time with the Fire Lord. So we got all of that time dedicated to the characters. And I think, when you do 3 seasons where you're doing one arc for each character really in detail versus 4 seasons worth of mini arcs that are also having to step aside often because each year we're introducing a brand new villain that also now needs characterization because we're doing that in depth now, and these villains are going on arcs now. That's tricky. That's tricky. That's a hard balance. There's a lot going on there. So it shouldn't be a surprise to any of us that they're not as in-depth or as satisfying as the arcs from Last Airbender. And I think that's a structural thing that was just the way it was. Like, they obviously could have written season 2 particularly better, but that problem still exists in 3 and 4, even though those are the better seasons. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's an uneven show for that reason, and maybe the show was more ambitious. There's a saying in F1, ambition ahead of adhesion, and what it means is you tried to go around a corner too fast, and your ambition for how quickly you could get around that corner was beyond how much grip you actually had in your tires, and your car then slides off the track because you hit the corner too fast. And I feel like this is what this is. Their ambition, admirable as it was, maybe was more than the show could really handle, and maybe the answer might have been to maybe reduce the cast on our heroes' end, maybe, so that we could have just a couple of very focused on characters alongside the villains, rather than quite a wide cast of heroes. Maybe the mistake was actually attempting to assemble at all any form of Team Avatar, because then that creates disappointment. Maybe Korra should have been a bit more of a loner, and then we'd have had less love triangles and what's Mako doing this week.
I don't think I'd like that either, though. I like it. You know what I mean? I like a love story, and a love triangle's different. And I love a Team Avatar. And I think part of the problem is, though, they they themselves put the pin in that. Like, there's episodes where literally, I think it's Bolin refers to them as Team Avatar, and
100%.
you as an audience member are just like, but you're not. Like,
Yeah. So that's why I'm sort of like, just commit to going the other way completely then. Don't half it with like giving us like breadcrumbs of that stuff. If you can't do that stuff properly, then maybe don't do it. Like, because then the worst we could say, yeah, it's very different. It's bold. You know what I mean? Like, we wouldn't be able to criticize them for having uneven character arcs or messy like growth as the series went on, or any of that stuff that we criticized the show for across its time with the way it handles its characters. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like you wouldn't have those criticisms because like they'd have been able to just focus on, you know, 2, maybe 3 characters completely and their journey. And also it would have been very different to have a more isolated loner Avatar, and it would have made sense for Korra too. She was raised, you know, by the White Lotus. She was raised separate from the world, so the idea that she might find it difficult to make friends and like have a big crowd around her is, you know, that's interesting to me, and you know, we might end up with that in the next series based on the premise, but like yeah, I don't know. It's I feel like maybe committing to that might have been smarter in the long run, in terms of giving us interesting character arcs, but hey ho. I have a question here, Chris. If you don't mind us moving on.
No, not at all.
And I think this one is directly aimed at me, and forgive me if I'm wrong here, but I and also it had required reading to do this question. There was homework assigned, so I've done that, and I didn't bother Chris with it. He's busy at the moment. But basically, Punkfish sent us some videos on the politics of Legend of Korra. And there are 4 of them, 1 for each book. And the premise is basically that each series seemed to tackle a real-world political ideology. So Season 1 tackled communism with the Equalists. Season 2 tackled colonization. Season 3 sort of looked at anarchy with Zahir. And then obviously nationalism with our final season. And I was asked just thoughts on those videos because, let's be honest, I had more than a few rants about the politics of the show as it went on. Now, I'm just going to do this as quickly as I can without it turning into a rant. The videos are really interesting, and I think the person who made them is clearly very, very smart and knows a huge amount about politics. I'm not convinced they're as wise when it comes to television and storytelling. I didn't love the videos, if I'm being honest. I found them in places to be a little disingenuous. They come from No, disingenuous is the wrong word. I think their intent is good, but I think it ends up coming across. There's a few, I'd say, questionable arguments put across in these. But so they come from a channel called Kay and Skittles, and I do think people should watch them. I am actually going to say people should watch these videos. I think they're interesting. Send the love and the traffic to Kay and Skittles. But for me personally, I think there was a lot of leaps in logic. I think the problem with taking real world political ideologies and applying them to Korra and then using that to assess what you think the creators think politically is a bad idea in premise to start with, because the issue you're going to run into is Korra doesn't equate to the real world. So when they're talking about communism in book 1, and the person in the video also mentions this, resources in the real world being spread across people doesn't equate to bending, because you can't take bending and spread it to the other people. So Korra's version of communism is automatically different to real world communism. So any criticisms or observations about it the show makes don't have a real world allegory, because it's automatically different. It's not like wealth.
That makes sense.
You can't take bending and give it to the masses. All you can do in Korra, and all Amon's doing in Korra, before he's revealed his true identity, is take it from people. That's the destruction of wealth, not the spreading of wealth. It's not really communism. Now, you could, if you want, say, I don't think the creators of this show understand communism, but I would say, you can't know that for sure. Maybe they just made those choices for their story set in their magical Avatar world. not because they don't particularly understand communism. And, you know, while there are interesting allegories about him turning out to be a faker, and, you know, there are people who have abused communist ideals for their own wealth and power, while telling everyone else we need to share the wealth and power, you know, that's a real world problem. And that's what Amon does. Another problem I noticed, and this is just a small, well, it's not a small thing, but it's like, also there are times in which there's videos in which they answer their own question. Like in the second video, and I only watched the first two, but in the second video they talk about the difference in, so they point out that Varric and Amon do similar things. They both commit sort of false flaggy terrorist attacks to try and gain public ire one way or another, but Varric's a profiteer and Amon has an ideology. And look at it, and the point they make is, look how the show treats them differently. You know, Amon dead as a result of a murder suicide. Varric in a cushy cell. You know, and then he escapes. And then goes on to get a character arc where he turns good. And it's like, look how the show treats the wealthy character versus the sort of like the character that comes from a more impoverished background. And I'm kind of thinking, yeah, correct. They're making up. I would argue, you could argue they're making a point there about how people are treated when they commit crimes, whether they have wealth and power or not. I don't think that's a flaw. I think that might be I don't think that's a bug. I think that's a feature. So I think the videos are well-intentioned, maybe, but I think that the premise of trying to assess Mikey and Bri-Bri's political views based on their use of real-world politics to help inform Korra is maybe a bit misguided to start with. I think analysing Korra and saying, oh, how does it stack up to the real-world equivalents is one thing, but to say, well, they've made this ideology look good and they've made this ideology look bad, therefore they must be against communism, they must be against socialism, they must be for this, they must be for that, is, I think, a slippery slope and a big error, in my opinion. So I only had the chance to watch 2 of the 4 videos. I probably will watch the other 2. They are interesting. I do think people should watch them. But to cover that, I think... I don't dislike the videos, but I do think they're flawed in premise.
Did you go in order, or did you watch the Series 4 one?
I didn't end up watching the Series 4 one. No, I watched the first 2. So I haven't done the Series 4 one.
Yeah,
I am interested in the Series 4 one. I think that is potentially the most interesting, looking at nationalism and how they handle that, because I do think Series 4 has some interesting...
Yeah, that was my assumption, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm sad I didn't have enough time to get to that, because this question came in, like... sort of like 30 odd hours ago, and I only had a chance to watch 2 of the 4. Maybe I'll change my mind if I watch the other 2, and we'll come back to it. But yeah, at a glance, I didn't love the assumptions about the creators of the show, based on the activity, because I think why put down to a political ideology something that can be just as easily explained by poor writing. Of which the first 2 seasons of Korra had plenty.
Yeah, especially Series 2. Oh boy.
Or just even they attempted to put an ideology into the show, but then it wouldn't fit to the story they wanted to tell, and then it got real messy. You know, and I think reading too much into what they meant by some of the stuff in the show is probably a mistake, but that's just me.
Yeah, fair enough.
So let's do some of the stuff. So this one comes from Verimex. This is just a little comment. This is from our Discord from when the second episode came out, which I think of season 4, which was was Korra Alone, and you wrote, they wrote, but in quote marks, all right, she's going through a tough time, but crack a smile, Chris. Apparently that's what you said, and then they added channeling the inner Carl Pilkington there, Chris.
Yeah, I really wish I knew the context of that quote, because in isolation doesn't sound good in terms.
Well, my assumption is my assumption is we were making a joke about the fact that like she's obviously very down in this, and then you sort of sarcastically said, "Yeah, lady, crack a smile," you know, because obviously we were, you know, she obviously had very good reason to not be happy, but it did make me laugh, so I wrote it down. This one I'm going to aim straight at you, Chris. So this is from Heidi the Vet Fairy, and this was on our Long Live the Queen episode. Actually, this came in during season 4, but it was actually for a season 3 episode. But it says, you guys mentioned Death in Heaven somewhere in here. I think about that episode of Doctor Who all the time. I remember watching it when it came out, and listening to this made me go and check out when it was released. Turns out I was 9 years old when I first saw it. No wonder I enjoy the darker episodes of Korra. It's more of a comment than a question.
Yeah, man.
But thoughts on that, Chris? Other than how old that makes us feel, knowing that somebody watched that at the age of 9.
Yeah. It makes us feel very old, and I think in terms of take a shot, Doctor Who, Death in Heaven is probably the most you and I disagree on an episode, because I don't dislike it. I just thought it was too far. I thought its ideas were too far, as I think we discussed in the episode that's being referred to here. But equally, you know, you're saying you were 9 and watched it and loved it, and that's why you enjoy the dark episodes of Korra. Fair enough. Like, yeah, I can't deny it's impactful television. And I've rewatched it as well recently. I do that with Doctor Who. I don't rewatch the entire show, but occasionally I'll remember an episode and be like, yeah, I will sit down and watch Time Heist from series 8, you know. And yeah, I did that with that 2-parter, and there's definitely a lot of effective stuff in there for sure. And Chris Addison's phenomenal. Chris Addison is on amazing form in that episode.
Yeah, he is.
But yeah, I just thought some of the ideas were not right for a young audience. But
I guess
maybe that's the point.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was because obviously it's like, how do you shock the current young generation? Like, you know, back in the day, a Dalek was enough to scare a child. I guess it was Moffat reaching for something a modern day audience would find creepy, and he found rather than like a funny monster, he found like a creepy idea, like a really creepy idea.
And as I've acknowledged before when we've talked about this, there's my own shit in there. Like, you know what I mean? There's just some of those ideas are particularly, you know, it's as a subject particularly effective to me. You know, there will be other people, you know, it's like I'm sure people terrified of spiders. Not that I'm necessarily terrified of certain things, but yeah, anyway. We don't need to get into an existential look at mine and yours fears or whatever, but although maybe we should. I'm sure anyone terrified of spiders doesn't like arachnids in the UK, even though, you know, we look at arachnids in the UK as, you know, well, the fundamental problem being the Doctor's attitude and the resolution, but anyway, also something we probably don't have time to get into. But yeah, anyone scared of spiders would be scared of that, and there's definitely some stuff in that episode that is you know, specifically for me. So yeah.
You know, would it be an Avatar podcast without slipping in a bit of Doctor Who discussion? So I'm a happy damn.
Yeah, for sure.
And
I think also, like, and I don't know whether. Yeah, no, it would have been. Yeah, because we've put the I think there's a lot of parallels with Jodie Whittaker's last few episodes of Doctor Who and Series 4 of Korra. So yeah.
Yes, yeah, I would agree. Where are we at? Let's have a look at my comments list. Sorry, 1 second. Oh, here we go. Yeah, so this comes from Shadow Vanify, because I jumped around a little bit there. I can't remember. I'm sure I had a good reason at the time. So who gave us this question? It was on the episode for the coronation. I think both options for the Earth Kingdom leadership are intentionally presented as not very enticing. But while Wu is selfish, immature, and naive, he comes off as a good person at heart. He just needs to do some growing. Kuvira is brutal, unrelenting, and absolutely certain her cause is just. It's much harder at this stage to see her being convinced of the wrongness of her actions than it is to think Wu will be able to mature into a kinder and wiser ruler. And this is actually highlighting, I think, maybe the problem with analysing the politics of the show so specifically, because this is the difference between storytelling and real world analogies for real world politics. From a storytelling perspective, this listener is exactly correct. Prince Wu is presented as the more redeemable immediately, but because of my own personal feelings on monarchies, not because of what the show has presented to me, but my own personal feelings on monarchies. Oh, and I guess a bit what the show has presented to me, because obviously we demonstrated the previous year, actually, the Queen was dreadful and the Earth Nation was... Okay, no, scratch that point, actually, because actually, no, I think it was more based on the previous season. But had we not done the stuff the previous year in the Earth Kingdom, bringing my own feelings of politics to that would have made me feel like Prince Wu wasn't a valid choice to run anything, not just because of how he's presented, but because of a political ideology and my own personal feelings on the monarchy. But thankfully, in this show, actually, one thing they handled really well in the last couple of seasons, they did give us a good reason to dislike both, I think, which I think was the intent, I think...
but towards the end, they gave us reasons to like Wu,
yes,
because obviously he chose to stand down and demolish it and all.
This episode, though, it should be clarified that they commented on, is the coronation episode. So this is very early. This is pre-Prince Wu's.
Oh yeah, no, I was responding more to what you said there than them.
Yes, but I think they're talking about our. Sorry, I just knocked on my microphone. I think they're referring to our early debate about how are we supposed to invest in this when both options seem terrible. I don't know. I'm muddling myself up between I shouldn't have brought in the other question because I've confused myself. But I think I agree basically that from a story perspective, there is definitely more room for Wu to have improved, and maybe we should have seen that when we were talking about those early episodes.
And I just think actually what they did with him was one of the cleaner arcs of the season.
Yeah, it was.
and sort of tracked all the way through, and I really liked the conclusion to his arc there. And obviously also Venick, am I pronouncing Venick right?
Varrick with an R.
Varrick and Julie, just, they didn't come up earlier when we were talking about characters going from A to C via D. I think Varrick and Julie are a good example of a more straightforward A to B that was very effective.
Yes, I would agree. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention when we talk about the politics thing very quickly, I will say the one point those videos make that I did think was very, very valid and is thing. The problem that the show sometimes bumps into when it's doing political ideologies is Avatar as a series is all about balance, right? And what that meant in the original series was more about balance of good and evil, right? Like that balance of spirituality, right? And the problem is when you use the word balance when you end up getting into a political world, you end up just coming across centrist. And that's a problem, and for me personally. So I think maybe the mistake they made at all was trying to make a more nuanced show with politics in it, full stop, out of the Avatar world, because I think the Avatar world had a deliberately sort of cartoony morality of like good and evil, and that's not a criticism. That's just what it was, and trying to give it nuanced political discussion maybe was a mistake to start with. From Mikey and Bri, because like ultimately Korra had to just constantly defend the status quo as balance, and I think we live in a world where defending the status quo would be a big fucking mistake. So I think that's me again, my personal politics affecting my view of how Korra came across.
No, but also I think they struggled because they didn't, as you've already said, they didn't fully commit one way or the other.
Right.
Because as we've discussed, all of the villains, like in that tough scene, it's talking about ideologies going too far and stuff. I rewatched the tough stuff. In case anyone's like, why has he got a really good memory of like that one specific scene? I went back and rewatched some of the tough stuff for this.
Do love tough.
also, they have the villains do some horrific shit. You know, like needlessly killing loads of people, like being so strong in their beliefs that they're gonna kill them or shoot down their fiancés in this, and you can't do both. Like, it's a struggle to do. Like, I've watched the, obviously, as we've already discussed, there's a need for recaps, and there's you know, I therefore watched a recap video for this of season 4, and you kind of go, oh yeah, she did. She was so resolute in her feelings that she decided to shoot her fiancé and attack a town with a big Power Rangers robot, and then also just kind of had a chat with Korra about ideals in the spirit world at the end of it.
Yeah.
and it's jarring, and it's not smooth, and it's because they're trying to do both so staunchly, I think.
Yeah. And also the other thing that muddles this, of course, is the villain with a point idea. Just because you give your villain, and this is just in general, just absolutely for any show, movie ever, story ever, you can get, it's a very common trope to give the villain a good point. But then have them attempt to achieve their goal through means that are evil, like murder or whatever, you know. And then you have to have that. Then it's that conversation of, it's a person with a good point. You agree with them, but the frustration is that they're going about it the wrong way, right? It's the Black Panther thing. I think Black Panther is one of the cleanest versions of that story, maybe ever. It's why that first Black Panther movie is fantastic. But the problem, again, with assuming because it's like, they've made the bad guy, insert political ideology here. They must think that's a bad ideology. Well, no, maybe they were going for the bad guy with a point premise. You know, maybe the bad guy was right, but they went about it the wrong way. You know, I will say as well, like, the show doesn't do enough sometimes because it doesn't have enough time. Because again, the show is ambitious; it's more ambitious than it succeeds to be. It doesn't always have the time to set it up properly. Like, for example, Amon, who's all about, like, you know, the non-benders are being oppressed. We don't see a lot of that, so it's hard to know if Amon has a point. Do you know what I mean? Like, we can tell that all of the council is made of benders, and that doesn't seem great. And I think at the end of that series, they announced there's, like, a person on the council that's not a bender, or a person that's in power that's not a bender, or whatever. And I guess that's progress. But, like, we don't see a huge amount of, like, non-benders being legitimately just, like, on the street oppressed. We get tiny glimpses of, like, there are people who are being bullied by criminal gangs who are abusing their bending. But that's not a systemic... Well, the reason those criminal gangs exist is through systemic issues. But, like... You know what I mean? That's not a government agency showing up with firebenders to bully people into doing stuff. So it's very muddled, and it's muddled because of not because of ideologies, but because of poor writing choices. And again, more ambitious ideas than the show ever really had the time to tackle, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah. But again, I think the amount we talked about it does tell you how much those videos are interesting. So I will once again nudge people to check out.
I'm going to check whether I watch all 4, but certainly the Series 4 one in particular, I think I'm very intrigued to catch, because I think Series 4 was, whilst there are kind of political themes throughout the show, if I think, and I might be wrong because it's literally years since we started it, but I feel like Series 4 was the most we discussed politics on here.
I would agree.
You know,
yeah, I would agree. I've got one for Chris. This is from Teflon, again from the Discord. It's a comment from, I think, pretty early in the season. No, but this is about midway through. So Teflon, well, first of all, they say, loving Dan's train rant. I don't recall this rant. I'm assuming I was ranting about people on public transport making noise. But it really could have been about anything. It could have been about trains being delayed.
I think you were ranting about that specifically.
Yeah.
I seem to remember in this season a rant involving a lift. You held the lift for someone, they didn't say thank you, or...
No, I held the lip for
like
someone, but then they didn't actually like speed up to get to it, and eventually I just had to let
That
it
was it.
go, and I was like, "Am I a monster?"
was
Actually, you know what? It's possible my train rant was just about like the logic of the trains in Korra as well, because they introduced the train this season. But anyway, it doesn't matter. The main point of Teflon's comment that I wanted to get to, that's for you, Chris, is also Chris flip-flopping between loving the romance but also not liking the power imbalance is very funny with regards to Varric and Julie, and also correct. Also, they say also correct to question that, Lamo. So I've got to ask you now, Chris. Having seen the whole season, I don't think we ever really we talked about Julie and Varric, but let's go deep, Chris. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that sentence. I feel dirty. I didn't even mean it to come out that way. It wasn't intentional, but it just sounded wrong. Yeah. So your concern at the beginning of the series. And I think they won you over in the end, because I think we both talked positively about their relationship at the end of the series. But your concern was that obviously there's an automatic power imbalance with Julie and Varric because she is his employee. Do you think they scooted around that in the end? Did you feel less icky about it by the end? Is it still a problem? Where did you land?
I think, and you know, as with any question like this on this podcast, the caveat of it's been a while since we watched. But and the recap videos aren't that long. Like I skipped to the series 4 section on the main recap for the series, and I was like, oh, it's only 4 minutes. But my memory is that they do enough to show Julie kicking ass and gaining like a sense of no, fuck off. Like, you know, obviously she goes against him, but she's not really against him and all that stuff. My memory of the way like the proposal is handled, I think by the end of the series, the power imbalance isn't there as much because Julie is standing her ground and you know, being firmer. So, yeah, they did win me round on that for that reason.
Yeah. So you didn't feel as icky about it by the end?
No, because I think their situation has changed by the end, and their dynamic with each other has changed, and her dynamic as a character. You know, I mean, early on the character is literally there to be barked orders at, whereas by the end
she's subservient in the beginning, and then it's the other way around.
Yeah, and absolutely kicking ass by the end. So, and you know, I don't think that's necessarily like real world answers to some of this shit. Like, do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. The answer to power imbalance is not for one of the people to get stronger. It's for the other one to realize there's an imbalance and address it themselves. So, you know, I'm not recommending it as a solution in real life. But I think in terms of the show and my feelings about it, it's certainly less icky.
Yeah, that's fair. This one's from.
Would you agree?
Oh yeah, 100%. I would basically say the same thing as you if I answered that question. I think by the end they made Julie a independent enough character, who's making decisions for herself and, you know, was not subservient to him. That when they finally pulled the trigger on the relationship, the power imbalance was kind of gone. That's how I sort of see it. No, I mean, you know, in the sort of like over sort of cartoony way that a show like this can do that. Obviously, he's still technically her employer, but you know what I mean. From a character perspective, that imbalance is gone. Yeah. So this comment comes from Cremota. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And this was on Korra Alone, which is episode 100. It says, unrelated to the episode, but I want to... Oh, thank you. I just went to the trouble of finding out which episode it was from, Cremota. Who was on episode 100, because Korra Alone. Unrelated to the episode. All right. Thanks.
I feel like that's your fault for not reading the question even a little bit, but there we go. If the question 6 sentences in when this isn't related to the episode, by the way, I think you'd be entitled to that little mini rant. But considering the question begins unrelated to the episode, I feel you've only got yourself to blame.
I really do. Oh, that's very funny. So this is more of a comment than a question, but I would like to read it out because I think it's very nice. Unrelated to the episode, but I want to thank you for the podcast. Strangely enough, this Korra series specifically has been connected to a very specific part of my life, which is me learning how to drive. I listened to episode one. I listened to episode of 1 of Korra while on the bus to get to a first aid class. I listened to the rest of books 1 and 2 on my way to actual driving lessons. And now, right when I start my motorcycle training, your Book 4 podcast comes out. And while my bike training will take longer than this podcast due to winter approaching, I'm looking forward to listening to the rest of it. Well, thank you very much, Promoter. I think that's really cool that your journey to being capable of driving vehicles that I would be too scared to even look at lined up so well with our podcast. I'm terrified of motorcycles. I think motorcycles are the scariest thing in the world. I'm an absolute wuss. I wouldn't touch one with a 10-foot barge pole. You are a braver person than I, Promoter.
I can't remember if we've ever. Yeah, absolutely, and thank you for your lovely comment. And
yes.
I'm glad you enjoyed things. Glad you enjoyed listening, and glad it connected with you in that way. That's awesome to hear. I will tell you a story to back up what Dan said. I can't remember if we've ever moaned about this, if we've ever talked about this before, and if we have, I apologise. But on my stag do. We did axe throwing, and I was the worst axe thrower you've ever seen, and didn't really love it as an activity. And Dan wandered over and was highly critical of my axe throwing. And
it was shooting. It wasn't axe throwing. It was shooting, wasn't it?
It was shooting. You're right. It was shooting. You're absolutely right. Sorry.
I was listening to that and I'm going, I don't remember any axe throwing. What did you have a second stag do?
That's how bad I am, right? I couldn't even remember the raw masculine activity it was. It was shooting, and I'm not good with a gun. Listeners would be shocked to hear. So I was really bad at it, And Dad comes over and he's looking at my score sheet. And he just goes, and Dad and I were sharing a room, so maybe we'd reached the tetchy stage of our relationship after a lot of time with each other. But Dan goes, cool, even I got a better score than this. And I just remember turning to Dad and going, you're literally stood here right now because you don't even want to do the quad biking.
Yeah.
Because the reason you'd wandered over, just in terms of the motorbike thing, that's the link of why I'm telling that story, is because you'd looked at the quad biking, especially after someone came off a quad bike and just went.
I said no before.
Oh, was it before?
That's what I felt so. I tell you what, I have never felt more justified in my life. Right? I just want listeners to know this. I was the only one that was like, nah, not doing the quad biking. I'm sorry to be the party pooper. I'm just going to watch. And that's fine. I'm allowed to do that. That's my I'm going with that.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not suggesting you shouldn't have done that.
No. But it was a big group of guys. And, there's a lot of masculinity that goes around a stag do. There's a lot of, Dan's been a wuss, blah, 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 blah. And then immediately, within 10 minutes of me saying that, someone came off a quad bike in what I will describe as one of the most gruesome falls I've ever witnessed. The sound his body made when he hit the floor will live in my memory forever, that thud. And to the hospital he went.
Ribs up.
It was bad.
Yeah.
Was it broken ribs? Was that what it was?
I don't think he broke them, but he severely fractured them. What the reason because I didn't witness that accident because I was in the other group sucking at shooting, so I didn't see it. But the reason I knew it was that was severe is usually if something like that happens on a stag weekend, especially when you've got multiple pockets of friends, so you got 2 people that know each other really well, and then you got 4 people from school that know each other well, and then you got the 3 people from work, and then you've got that uni mate that's just lingered because you do a podcast with him. You've got different pockets. Usually when something like that happens,
wait, was I the only person from uni there?
No, that was just a joke, but yeah, you would have been. Yeah. Yeah. There was only, if you think about it, there was only one other person from uni at the wedding. There were meant to be 2, but one couldn't go. But yeah,
that's funny.
So I think uni's it's not a discussion for now, but uni fascinates me for that because those relationships feel so intense, and then you get older, and invariably it's the relationships you have at childhood that you maybe cling on to more than like uni. I imagine most people have more childhood friends at their wedding, for example, than uni friends, even though it doesn't feel like that when you're at uni. Anyway, so especially when there's different pockets of people, you've always got people going, oh yeah, it weren't that bad. Like, oh yeah, it was nothing. Like you said, there's that sort of bullish, like not great masculinity around it, and it would be, oh, I don't know what he's talking about. Da da da. Every single person that witnessed, I'm sure he wouldn't mind being named. Every single person that witnessed Tom come off that quad bike went, that was fucking bad. That was real bad.
It was brutal. It was absolutely brutal to watch. Like, and I want to clarify as well, because it's what we've described sounds like I witnessed that and then just wandered over to Chris and went, bloody hell, your shooting's not good, is it? There was a lot of time between the accident happening and actually the reason I was up away from the quad biking is because I, as someone who was not quad biking, was the one who brought Tom back to the main hut, which was near the shooting, and while we were waiting for the ambulance or whatever, like I'd wandered back out and like noticed the shooting scores were not great.
And for those questioning the health and safety here, you're right too. Basically, we obviously, we did it through the guys organising the stag, did it through a company. And you just assume reputability and all that sort of stuff. No, this was basically just a couple of farmers that had a field. So when
they bought quad bikes and a shotgun and a clay pigeon shooting machine.
Yeah, and we're just like, let's just do this then. There was it wasn't great. My other favourite, just because it's a short one, my other favourite quad biking moment was something that happened in our group when we went quad biking, which was my, not as badly as Tom at all, but my uncle came off the quad bike as well. And the guy running it and both my cousins ran off to check he was all right. And about halfway through that run, one of my cousins stopped, turned around, walked back to us, and just went, too many cooks.
That's fair.
It's brilliant.
Fair,
So, yeah.
valid.
Love that.
It was a good time. Right. I don't remember how we got onto that, if I'm being honest with you, Chris. Shall I do the next question or next comment?
The comment and the comment on the motorbiking. And you not liking motorbikes.
Yes, sorry, yeah. So I'm a big wuss for that sort of stuff. If I'm in a vehicle, give me a nice, safe cushion of metal that can crush me.
I mean, even then, I've known you not enjoy car journeys if they're too long or windy.
Yeah, that's also true. Yeah, that's also true. I'd like to just take a pause for a second to read this comment, because this comment feels absolutely relevant to what's just happened. This is from the Ponderer. Who you should go check out, by the way. There'll be a longer comment from the Ponderer coming up later about the Korra, but the Ponderer has a YouTube channel and particularly a video breaking down Korra, all 4 seasons, which I've now finally seen because obviously I watched it. I don't like watching reviews of things I've not yet personally reviewed before I review them if I can avoid it, because I don't want it to influence my review first, if that makes sense. So I was watching the Ponderer's video in quarters, if memory serves, or maybe I think I watched the first 2 seasons together, but then I had to wait until we'd reviewed season 3 to watch the season 3 section, and same with season 4. I saw season 4 just literally last night, actually, because I was reminded that I hadn't yet seen that, and we'd finished 4 now. But the Ponderer put on one of our podcasts, it was on episode 109, Kavira's Gambit. It's not on Nothing But Static podcast without falling into a 5-minute tangent about Oasis right in the middle of a point.
Yeah. Very fair to what's just happened.
Yeah. A good comment. Excellent comment. Made me smile. And also, yeah, accurate. So yeah, people should go check out the Ponderer, sayer of smart things. Really interesting videos. I think what's really interesting actually is I think often when it comes to the detail, we do disagree with the Ponderer. They're different, things going back and forth. Like there are different details that we disagree on. But I actually think listening to the fourth part and the final sort of wrap up, I feel like we ultimately landed in the same place on Korra. You know, overall, I feel like our ultimate thoughts on Korra being good but flawed, and particularly in its first 2 seasons, really matches up with the conclusion that the Ponderer comes to. I think, even if there are details along the way we didn't, we don't necessarily agree on, obviously in a polite way. Not that I'm talking about like an argument sort of way. Just like we'll sometimes get a comment from the Ponderer that has a different opinion on something that we've posited in the episode. Sometimes the Ponderer just like says something and I go, oh yeah, that's exactly right. I don't know why we said or thought that, which happened recently with one of the X-Men ones, because I think we criticized like, well, would Rogue have gone for the cure like this stage in her sort of arc, and the Ponderer was like, yeah, she would have done, and then pointed it out. And I was like, oh yeah, you're right, she would have done. And I was like, yeah, no answer to that.
Good point, well made.
Good point, well made. Sometimes you say stuff on a podcast, you just say stuff, and it makes sense in the moment, but then you think about it more thoroughly afterwards. That's the downside to these being conversational. People, sort of commit them to memory sometimes. Not commit them to memory, but like people take them as like, they take them in the way they would take it in a pre-written review, and they're just not the same. They're not the same at all. So let's see. Actually, the next comment is from the Ponderer, so we'll do that while we're here. It's not the long one we'll get to later, but just they mentioned for the Battle of Zaofu episode 104, they said this is actually the episode where a friend I was watching with gave up on the show. She was just sick of seeing Korra lose so damn much. Yeah, we talked about that, didn't we? That was the episode where Korra got her ass handed to her by Kuvira. We didn't like that episode either. Not necessarily for the same reasons. I don't think it's a problem to let Korra be defeated by the villain halfway through the season. In fact, if anything, I think that's correct. Like, because then it builds up the villain as a legitimate threat because the hero can't topple them, and you know that they've got to overcome some stuff before they can. But I guess this season lays it on a bit thick because Korra loses a bunch in the first half of the season, not just in that one clean, obvious fight to Kuvira, but like just in life. She's just, when we start the season, she's like losing in like a underground cage fighting thing. She's getting beat up all the time. She's obviously just had a bit of a rough fight with Zahir, like at the end of the previous season. Like Korra, by the time we reach this fight in Zaofu with Kuvira, it is a bit like it's laid on a bit heavy.
I think the thing is, it's so intrinsically linked to the back and forth of how she is and whether she's quote unquote healed and dealt with her trauma and all of that sort of stuff. And I think, the fights are almost representative of that. It looks like that story's concluded, or, she's, however you want to phrase it, recovered from her demons, whatever. But she hasn't. And, as I think we said at the time, that is true to life, obviously. But the way the show is presenting it as, as we've referenced here in episode 3, as sort of this storyline is finished, but it actually isn't. Her continuously getting her ass kicked in fights is sort of, I think it's actually the same problem for me at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. From the same episode, Alchemic Wolf says, while I agree with all your points, I do want to point out that Zaofu would really only be an impenetrable city to other nations. Kuvira being both a very powerful metal bender and someone who has not only lived in Zaofu, but probably helped in creating some of the security for it, makes it not so impenetrable to her. That being said, you guys were spot on with everything else. I do agree with this, that Kuvira is the one person that you go, yeah, she'd get in. But I think one of the issues we raised with it, and I guess that's what you're saying by you agree with everything else, is it's not just that she got into the impenetrable city. It's that it seemed relatively easy and quick. I think showing any amount of Kuvira struggling to get in might have been better. if you're gonna make a real point one series earlier when we first visit Zaofu, she's 100%. Korra's 100% safe here from Zahir. Absolutely no one can get into this city ever under any circumstances. It's impenetrable. And then the very next season have someone pretty much walk in, even if it makes sense. I think, even though you're right, the one person that should be able to get in is Kuvira. I still think there should have been some struggle, personally. even if we do just a scene where some of them are like, Kuvira, we can't get in. They've fortified this, and Kuvira's like, okay, I know about an entrance here. Just show that it wasn't just like a knife going through butter. That would be my preference.
Yeah.
But I do agree with your point. Absolutely, Kuvira is like the one person that like raises the least questions about that.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
Mm-hmm. So this one comes from Shared of Anify. Is that who the last comment came from? Might have been. No, Alchemic Wolf. Okay, sure, different names. Back in season 1, Mako's day job was lightning bender in some kind of power plant, so it's definitely reasonable that the mechs would be electrically powered by some kind of battery. Interesting thought. I think we were talking about what powered the mechs, weren't we? Because it was...
I have no idea now. I'm not even sure what the mechs are, mate. Now, this is stretching my bad middle-aged memory too much.
Yeah, I remember the mechs. I don't 100% remember what we said regarding them, but I think I was sort of talking about... Because they do a storyline in this series and about how they're powered with Spirit Vine stuff? Or is that just Kuvira's weapon? I think maybe I was talking about at one point they do an EMP to take on the mechs, and I was like, how does that work electrically speaking? But I guess the point Shadow of Anify is making here is we've established that this world has electricity and power plants, so the mechs being powered by standard electricity to then be taken out with an EMP makes sense. So yeah, I'm going to just agree with that because yeah. But again, my memory, unfortunately, of what specifically is being covered there. Thin. Yeah,
same.
So we're getting towards the pointy end, as they say in Australia, because we're looking at comments from the last couple episodes now. So this comes from Doc Martian 6938. What happened to the other 6,937 Doc Martians? Sorry. That's the dumbest thing I've said all day.
For anyone wondering, giving that the silence it deserves.
Yeah, absolutely right. So they said on the Day of the Colossus episode, which is 110, nearly caught up after starting 3 months ago. Gotta say, Prince Wu takes the cake for character I had no plan to like at all, but ended up completely turning around on. Imagine if a young Queen Elizabeth in like 1940 was seen as a dumb young girl, but helped evacuate children and other civilians during the Blitz. No wonder all the older folks loved her. Lol, not British or even a monarchist, but props to Wu for really turning around. Especially no, that's the end of a sentence, by the way. They're not going not British or monarchist, but props to Wu. That's that was my fault.
No, I just love the I love this comment so much. Because at first with the Queen Elizabeth thing, I was like, yeah, that's a fair analogy. But then it's almost like that analogy just goes on for 1 or 2 sentences too long. That comment it just feels like I've written it. Yeah. I love that. It's brilliant.
But the end of, but props to Wu
for Oasis in the middle of a point. It's brilliant.
But props to Wu for really turning around, and especially his supposed role in the Earth Kingdom post finale. I agree. I think Prince Wu goes on a really clean, solid arc, one of the better of the series, which is pretty good. And I also, and we've got digital record of this, I'd already seen the show, and I was questioning it at the beginning of season 4 when we were reviewing it. So the fact I was turned around on that with that much doubt is pretty impressive, in my opinion. So next comment, unless you have anything you want to add on that, Chris?
No. We talked about Wu earlier, and I think it's a very clean, very good arc.
Mm-hmm. So this one comes from Magic Fanatics, L8B. And this is on one of the later episodes. I think it's on The Last Stand. Not sure if you guys have any plans for your next podcast, but have you considered watching The Dragon Prince? It's very good, has similar vibes to Avatar, plus they got Sokka's voice actor as the main character. So, I have seen The Dragon Prince. I don't think I saw the very last season. I think I sort of fell off before it completed. I remember there being a big gap somewhere in its release schedule, and then I fell off during that. Like, there was a production halt, or there was just a really long wait between one season and another, and then my brain died. and it just fell off my radar. But it was a good show. I liked it a lot. I don't know if it has the sort of depth that would suit a review show like this, but it's very fun, and I do recommend people watch it if you enjoy Avatar and Korra. It's on Netflix, Dragon Prince. It's pretty good. It's a lot of the production team and writing guys from Avatar and Korra wandered over to that. It's got a distinct look that I think makes it a little cheaper to produce than an Avatar or a Korra. But yeah, it's good. I liked it very much.
Nice, sounds good.
Yeah, I don't know if you'd ever check that out, Chris. I suspect not. That's just on time-wise.
Yeah, well, yeah, just time and leanings in terms of animation. But I tend to almost exclusively watch animation if it's for a podcast. But I might surprise you one day.
I only watch animation when Dad makes me.
I don't think the impression was fair, but the statement was probably true. Yeah. So I realistically wouldn't. But like I say, maybe I'll surprise you.
Imagine if I just read all the comments in that tone.
Only the ones that I've written.
Yeah. So this one comes from.
If you see a comment that's like categorically agree with Chris, Dan was being an arse, you can read it in that tone.
There you go. This comment comes from Moo2900, who said, I found you two about a year ago when you covered Book 2 of Korra. I started binging all of your episodes till I was up to date. Just want to say you guys are great. Thank you. I always listen to the new episodes while I'm at work. I love the input you two give and always happy to hear people's opinions on Avatar and its world. Just want to say thank you for the entertainment, and I'm looking forward to the next project and new Rewind reviews. Well, lucky you, there is new Rewind reviews on the way. The first episode of the new series that's coming in May is Ghostbusters, and it's a good one. I had a good time recording that one. It's real fun. A lot of trivia. One of those movies with a bit of a batshit background. So I hope you're around with us till that. But yeah, thank you for the comment. You have anything you want to add, Chris?
Just at the thank you for the comment. That's awesome to hear. I'm glad you know the numbers would suggest not a lot of people transfer over to Rewind reviews. So
yes,
thank you for doing that. That means a lot.
Yeah, no, the numbers don't just suggest. I think they outright scream that there isn't a lot of a crossover between Analysing Avatar and Steven University, which does have crossover, and then Rewind reviews, which for I think the problem is it's just the age ranges, because I think like. Obviously, rewind reviews is very much for people our age, like, you know, mid-30s to 40s that like grew up watching all these movies from the 80s and 90s. But of course, a lot of the fans of Steven Universe and Avatar are a little younger than that. They lean younger, so they're like Mouse Hunt, Space Jam. Watching reviews of these movies. What's a RoboCop? You know, I totally get that.
Even the people that remember those movies are like, "Oh, podcast about nostalgic movies from my an hour and a half on Mouse Hunt." Nah, boys, I'm out.
Yeah. What's quick change? You know, I totally get it. Yeah, and this season, though, I will say this season. Our next season that's upcoming, with the trilogy we're doing, is going to be the Jurassic Park original trilogy, and I am so fucking excited to do those movies. I fucking love Jurassic Park. One of my favorite movies of all time. Cannot wait to cover it. And then the sequels. Yeah. Which will be less fun. No, I think The Lost World is underrated. So, come back to hear me sort of do that thing where it's like the first one's amazing, the second one is middling, and the third one's a piece of shit. Maybe I'll discover differently. Maybe I'll love the third one in review with talking dinosaurs and all. Anyway, let's have a look at the last couple of comments we got. Alchemic Wolf leads. It's a very similar comment, actually. I want to thank you guys for making so much for making this series. I'm going to miss these so much, but I very much look forward to what's to come. I'm excited for whatever series you guys decide to cover next. Here's hoping for Full Metal Alchemist Academy. Now, right. That would be a no. I really, really like Full Metal Alchemist. There is no way Chris is going to watch an anime. And also, we'd probably have to do Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood if we did it. one, it's my preferred way of watching that and experiencing that story. But two, I think it's cleaner because it's the filler and the animation's a little better, in my opinion. And I think that would be a controversial choice. So I think that we're damned if we do, damned if we don't with Full Metal Alchemist. So apologies, Alchemic Wolf, who I'm now understanding where your name might be coming from. But I don't think we're going to cover that. And in terms of what we're covering next, I mean, it sounds like we're just back to Avatar because there's a new Avatar series coming.
Yeah, I've seen anime. Like it's but
you've seen an anime? What anime have you seen?
Wasn't that you're gonna be like, no, Chris, no, it wasn't. I swear I watched an anime film for the podcast. Wasn't the thing? Because I watched the original as well, didn't I? The thing about the Death List thing. I thought I then went and watched the original anime or checked out a bit of
Death Note, yes. So Death Note is an anime. If you watched some of the original Death Note, then yes, but I don't think you did. I think you watched the movie. I think you watched the movie and then were like, oh, that's a fun idea.
Yeah, I definitely watched the movie. I remember again, that movie's another good example, much like Ghostbusters 2016, where it felt like we were the only two people in the world that enjoyed that movie.
Yeah, I don't think it's a masterpiece, and obviously, watch the anime, it's better. But like for an American adaptation of that concept in a 1 hour, where they cram the whole story or as much as they can into an hour and a half or whatever, yeah, it's pretty good. It wasn't bad at all. I enjoyed it. A lot of that enjoyment is just that the premise is very clever. But yeah, I remember enjoying it. But yeah, I don't think we're likely to do an anime. I mean, if we ever did, I think I'd be tempted to it be Attack on Titan. But Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood would also be good. I don't think that's a bad choice, but it's just like, it's that. I feel like, I don't know. Someone will have to update me in the comments. Maybe is Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood a controversial option? Are people just purists and like the original anime filler and all? I don't know. Let me know. I'm curious because my impression has always been that, and that I'm like weirdo for liking Brotherhood better. But maybe I'm not a weirdo. Maybe that's like a common opinion. I don't know. I'm not in the Full Metal Alchemist subreddit enough to know what the vibe is. So if someone wants to give me a vibe check on that, I'd appreciate it. Right. So these two kind of come together. So the first one, and you'll have to apologize. I'll have to apologize. It's Korra of the Desert 1118. Because I don't remember the context of your comment, and I couldn't track down what else happened in the news that week to give this context, so I am really sorry. But it says, man, what a week to get this episode. We've come so far in terms of depicting queer relationships in animation. So this is obviously on The Last Stand, episode 111. I don't remember what happened in animation that week that made this a funny time for that episode to have come out. But I do 100% agree with your sentiment. Obviously, depicting queer relationships in animation, when you look at something like Owl House and what it was allowed to do, Korra put the first brick in the foundation that was built upon. Like, you know what I mean? And like, then you get Steven Universe, and then you get this and that, and it just all sort of, we're building to a better place of representation. Disney are trying to tear it down brick by brick with some of their more recent choices, cutting episodes from certain shows and stuff. But like, the fact that Owl House existed in its form, very unapologetically having a queer relationship depicted in it, when it wasn't that long ago that Steven Universe essentially got cancelled for depicting it. And Steven Universe was even just like a facsimile of it, because obviously the gems don't have gender in the way that humans do. So it wasn't even really in the, like, it represented a queer relationship, obviously, but it even had that step removed of like culpability of being able to go, no, they're aliens. It's not the same. They could even have that defense, and they still got basically cancelled for doing it. So, yeah, we've come a long way, and I'm very proud. And I'm very happy that Mikey and Bri took us on, did their part in getting us on that journey. And even they have said since that they're not 100%. They don't think they went far enough. But I would, but for the time, they did a really good job.
Yeah, I in particular like Owl House. I think is just incredible what that show did. And yeah, I don't want to retread old ground. I think we made our feelings clear on Asami and Korra. Absolutely love them. Just wish there was more of them. But like you say, it was definitely You just think about how iconic that shot's become. Of them holding hands and stepping into the spirit world. And I think definitely. Owl House was allowed to jog where Korra walked, and I say that because there's still I don't think we've got to see anyone running yet, but we were closer. Hopefully still are closer to seeing an animation able to run. But Owl House is pretty damn close to running, to be fair. That was a jog you or I couldn't keep up with if it was, if we're comparing it to actual jogging. So yeah.
We haven't quite gotten Usain Bolt yet, but we've definitely got like a sort of what are those like local, like, those groups of women that do those sort of like light jogs in the morning? They get together and they have a little gossip while they have a little walk, a light jog. That's the speed Owl House has hit, which is faster than either Christian or I could do. But but we've yet to get a sprinter on the board. So fingers crossed that we get more representation as we go forward and more committed representation, and Disney don't keep just cutting episodes out because they're a bunch of fucking wankers. Anyway, cowards. Right, last comment, Chris.
Yeah, this isn't me defending Disney. This is more me highlighting problems elsewhere. Well, hey. It's not just Disney at the moment, is it? Like, Disney is not the only threat to this.
But like for the company that have held themselves up as a bastion of representation for a long time and have quite a, let's say, a large queer fan base, I think what they're doing is a more heinous level of betrayal. Warner Brothers is run by a fucking right-wing lunatic. Like, I don't expect Warner Brothers to do anything less, to be honest with you. But I think people want Disney to continue to be a place of representation. And they've always been shitty about it in that, and I've said this before, they've always just been, chasing the dollar. But I think it's extra hurtful to a lot of people, besides myself, that Disney do it. So that's why I use them as an example. Yeah. It's very depressing, everyone. We're in a really sad state right now. I mean, blame America, obviously, but
What's the next comment? Let's hopefully cheer ourselves up.
This also I say this one to last because this also deals with Korrasami as it is, and this comes. This is the big comment I mentioned earlier from the Ponderer, who starts their comment with "long comment incoming," and because we talked a lot, Chris, you'll remember in our last episode about how much Korra and Asami was correctly set up and how far back the setup for it went. And I think the conclusion we came to was somewhere in the second season, because they had Korra blush when she first gets back after being away in the second series. She blushes when Asami says something to her. Or maybe that's the fourth series. I can't remember. But we landed on a point when we thought they'd started hinting at it, but it was clearly in the Block 3, Block 4 production, and we didn't feel like it was the plan in seasons 1 and 2, was, I think, the conclusion we came to. So this is the Ponderer's comment. Hoping that by now Dan has been able to finish my Korra video, but if not, my 2 cents on the whole Korrasami subtlety thing is that the subtle nature of the relationship build-up is just fine. I just wish there'd been room for more of those moments, specifically in Book 4. I don't think any of it was unintentional or a lucky accident. I think the crew knew they were angling for Korra Asami endgame at least as early as the start of Book 3. How far into production they were when they came to that decision, I can't say, but production-wise, Books 3 and 4 are clearly 2 parts of one whole. That build-up, of that pair's rapport throughout balance was clearly part of the plan. If anything, I think the subtle nature of it was a matter of making lemons into lemonade. This was a kid's cartoon airing a decade ago, pre-Owl House, pre-She-Ra, pre-most of Steven Universe, pre-Princess Bubblegum Marceline becoming any kind of serious thing in Adventure Time. Part of why Korrasami is so momentous is that it was the first baby steps network animation took to toward a major same-sex couple of any kind, of the kind. Sorry, anything more substantial than that, we likely wasn't in the cards without S&P shutting that shit down. A separate issue is that Book 4 is so chock full of stuff and plot and characters that Korra and Asami don't spend a ton of time together, so the subtlety is less of an issue than them just not getting many on-screen moments together. I agree with all of that.
Yes, yeah, I think that was very eloquently put, very well said.
Yeah, I think we've kind of covered it already, but I think that with Korra and Asami, actually one of the bigger issues is just them not spending a lot of time together, structurally, because they're kept apart for a chunk of the series. So yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think obviously, moments like who she chooses to write to and all that stuff prove that they were definitely thinking of it. But I think in the situation they were in, where doing it outright would have got them in trouble. Best case scenario is doing it the way they did it.
Yeah, and I think Series 4, from the beginning of 4, they definitely had it planned and stuff. And I think there were maybe hints of their friendship earlier. Yeah, my comment earlier about it not being planned was sort of essentially from the beginning.
Right, and I still think that's true. I don't think it was planned from day one. I don't think it was planned. I don't think they started building the groundwork for that into place until season 3 at best. And I think that's
and I think what that comment, and that's fine by the way as well. That's okay. I think what that comment highlights well that we've perhaps not said throughout this podcast whenever it's come up, and sort of I in particular have made comments about wanting more of it and stuff, and what this comment eloquently addresses is that's not necessarily the creators' fault that they couldn't give more. So that's not
in that climate.
That's not
in that climate, the best we were ever going to get was something that was subtle until it very suddenly wasn't right at the end.
And even then, at the end, it's comparatively, I suppose, relatively subtle, but not for the time, as the comment makes the point of. So yeah, that's why the relationship is held in such high regard.
Yeah. So, any overall thoughts we want to tackle? Thank you everyone for your comments, by the way. Brilliant stuff. We got a whole podcast out of it.
I got a question, and I slightly am nervous to ask this because I don't want people to people might latch onto the comments here and be like, well, that's an excuse to do more. But how much extended media is there around Korra? And I say that because spoilers for presumably the comics, the adaptations that come after. But I went on Julie's Avatar Wikipedia, and she becomes president.
Does she? I did not know that.
What?
That's so funny.
Yeah. I was like, how much extended media is there here?
I have no idea. Yeah, so I've only ever done the extended media of the original Avatar. So I did some. I did comments on I did comics on, following the series, following the release of the series, I should say. So Aang and the gang in the search, and so it's the search, the promise. There's a series of, I think it's 3 or 4 graphic novel sort of runs that sort of tell the story of the immediate aftermath of the original series. And I quite liked those, but I've not gone beyond that. Oh, and I read the Kyoshi books. I like the Kyoshi books very much. They're good. So yeah, I don't know about Korra.
But that was for media. Yeah. Let me look. Let me see if I can see how many there were. Oh, blimey! A lot by the looks of it. Hold on.
I can't believe we've managed to get nearly 2 hours of podcast out of this. This is extraordinary.
Looks like there's 4. No. There's short story. There's loads, mate. Graphic novels. Yeah, there's quite a few by the looks of it.
Well, there you go. I don't think we'll ever have the time to go into those, but you never know.
It looks like there were 2 main kind of stories: Turf Wars and Ruins of the Empire.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
There we go. Anyway. There we go. Well, we've severed heavens, Heroes, whatever it's called.
I have a question,
We'll be
Chris.
back for that in some form.
I have a question. So they mentioned it in the log line for the new Avatar series, Seven Havens, whatever it is.
Seven Havens sounds like a Seven Havens is a British, holiday park, isn't it? Seven Havens. Relax.
Relax by the pool while your children are entertained in our new state-of-the-art entertainment complex,
which only costs £5 per hour.
Yeah. Well, £5 per minute. Let's be realistic. It's just occurred to me, Chris, that in the new series, the Avatar has a twin sister, right? That's what they say in the logline. Are we doing the whole one of them's the Avatar, one of them isn't, and there's jealousy angle? Or are we doing two Avatars because they're twins and they've both got Avatar powers? What do you reckon?
I thought I saw a thing suggesting they were estranged, that they didn't know each other.
Yeah, so they're gonna, presumably one is searching for the other. My question is the other one gonna have Avatar powers or no Avatar powers?
Well, I was about to say, I hope we're not doing jealousy.
But if they're estranged...
Actually, no one's actually been no one was jealous of Aang particularly, apart from, Zuki Poos maybe. Nobody was jealous of Korra, so it is an interesting angle, to be fair, for the world. But it certainly feels, if we take the very broad term of superheroes and class, Avatar as part of that, it feels very well trodden in superhero territory, but maybe not so much in Avatar territory, and maybe therefore there's merit.
Might be the reason for the estrangement. Or they could both have powers, and that's fine too. Oh, they could do. They're split. One has like water and air, and the other has earth and fire.
Yeah, that would be good. But,
at least interesting. There's a lot to do. There's a lot potentially they could do with this series. I'm excited for it. Anyway, comments below, everyone. Feel free, and then we'll any comments on this video we'll mention when we come back to cover Seven Heavens. So feel free. Any thoughts pre Seven Heavens existing? Get to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/nothingbutstaticuk. Find the video for this particular post and slap your comments and thoughts in there, or of course on our Discord, which you can get access to through our Patreon, patreon.com/nothingbutstaticuk, where you can get access to episodes like this a week ahead of their usual release. So when Seven Heavens comes out, we will... I don't know, again, that's the other thing. I don't know what we do in terms of Patreon for that, because it's going to be coming out weekly. I guess if we're doing it where we're waiting for the series to finish and then covering it, then we'll be doing it a week early on Patreon. But if we're just releasing it as is, I'm not as certain how we're going to do that in terms of giving Patreon the advanced access, but we'll see.
Fundamentally, we don't even know how the show is getting released, so let's, we'll work it out.
We'll work it out when we get there. But yeah, thank you everyone for your time listening to this, your patience, your comments mostly. We very much appreciate all the feedback we got across all the seasons of this. If we've ever read any of your comments out ever, we thank you very much for doing that. And of course, if you're just listening, we thank you for that too. And we really appreciate everyone who's sort of come on this journey with us, and excited to confirm in more certain terms than last time that the journey isn't over. Because like last time we did this, we were like, there's word on the street is that they're working on a bunch of stuff over at Avatar Studios. Shrug as to what it is. Huge amounts of rumours and speculation. There's a rumour that the sequel movies to Aang's story, maybe they're happening. There's rumours there's a new series following a bender after a Korra. Maybe that's happening. It's like we didn't know anything. So now we know for sure there's like 26 brand new episodes of an Avatar show coming. That's pretty exciting. So I'm hoping, not hoping, I know that we're going to get to cover that, and that's really exciting. So yeah, we'll see you guys then. In the meantime, check out our other stuff if you like. Nothing But Static. We talk about movies and TV shows. We just did an episode reviewing season 2 of Breaking Bad, but also we do every 2 weeks we review some of the newest shows of the day, talk about whether they're any good or not, and we do TV news.
Yeah, check it out. There's a lot of good stuff. We got we're not 100% sure when this is going up, But the next episode, we're talking about another animation. There you go. You want some animation hit? We're talking about Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man and The Pit,
which is not animated,
Yeah,
but is definitely worth discussing.
It is that there. Yeah, and then after that, is The Pit next, or is The Pit
No, the
Pit
Paradise is next and The Pit's after. But
Paradise.
these are some of the shows we're covering at the moment. So yeah, feel free to hop over to Nothing But Static, the main feed on whatever your podcast app of choice is. Of course, if you'd like to support us, you can head over to the Patreon for as little as $1 a month to support us there. And obviously, supporting us by just subscribing to the YouTube channel, liking the videos, reviewing the podcast on any platform you find it, commenting on the podcast on any platform you find it, always helps. That engagement tells the algorithm that you enjoyed the podcast and makes it way more likely to share it with other people. So that is a huge way you can support us without doing a huge amount of work. So we would appreciate that. But obviously, the main thing is just to keep listening. We appreciate that. So yeah,
absolutely.
Stick with us
so much,
and we'll be back for more Avatar stuff in the future. In a hopefully not too distant future. Who knows? Who knows? Because I don't. Do you know? Do you know, Chris?
No, I don't know.
I don't know.
Hence the silence. I've got no idea, but I'm excited. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what I think, Chris?
What?
I think he heard something about a flying cow near Kyoshi Island, so he set sail at dawn.
It's good stuff.
If you get what I'm
just
because you get it.
Just because we're surprised that it's been 2 hours doesn't mean it needs to be longer, does it?
No, let's end it there. Thanks everyone for listening. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
And we'll see you again for another Analysing Avatar.